Yeah, this is Elliot Stone, your moderator. Joining me today will be Linda Latterman, a life care planner of 30 years. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A with Linda and myself, and you're able to fill in the question box on the right side of the page if you have any questions to ask Linda or myself. Let's begin today with a brief introduction about life care plans for those not familiar with them, and then later we'll go to medical cost projections useful on your smaller $50,000 to up to $500,000 cases. Life care plans have been utilized over the years to maximize settlements in personal injury cases. Typically, they've been utilized on 7- and 8-figure personal injury cases due to the cost. The fees can run anywhere from $5,000 to easily $25,000 per case. Many life care planners charge by the hour, bringing uncertainty as to the final amount. Typically, life care plans have been used sparingly and generally later in the litigation to preserve working capital with the hopes about bringing about a settlement with expenses reimbursed post-settlement. The much more numerous mid-range cases, your typical neck, back cases with continuing medical treatments, with injections, possible surgery worth anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 up, have not warranted life care plans or even medical cost projections until now, again, due to the costs. Our basic premise is that the more life care plans utilized means more larger settlements. Interest-free medical cost projections and life care plans on the lien, we feel, is a game changer that will help to dramatically increase usage and firm profits. Just a little more by way of background, life care plans were begun about 30 years ago by a gentleman named Paul Deutsch, who was a PhD. And they proved valuable in managing the catastrophic injury cases, TBI, amputees, brain-damaged children. And the methodologies provided professionals with a consistent process for analyzing the needs of patients necessitated by the disability. So, what is a life care plan? Well, life care plans provide an organized, concise plan for the current and future lifetime medical needs with the costs. They account for all the medical care, the rehab needs, and are composed by typically board-certified professionals, doesn't have to be, including rehabilitation counselors, nurses, psychologists, physiatrists, and case managers. There's a board certification, which is granted by the Commission on Healthcare certification, but again, the life care planners need not be certified. Their plans are based on the medical records review, client interviews, current practical guidelines, etc. So what's included in a life care plan? Well, some of the things include the medications, diagnostic testing, wheelchair needs, orthopedic equipment needs, future projected surgeries, home furnishing, accessories, aids for independent function, etc. Now, I've mentioned both medical cost projections alongside life care plans, and both of these products help to disclose the hard future medical costs to help maximize settlements. They're similar in that both help to build case value. They're available on a lien if you wish, where you only pay at settlement. The life care planners quantify the future care, the hard costs. They're available for testimony. They don't work on contingency either. Now, the differences between the two, the medical cost projections are generally used on smaller cases, non-catastrophic, 50 to all the way up to $500,000 case values. They're used early on typically to help promote a settlement. The clients and treating doctors are not interviewed in medical cost projections, unlike the life care plans. Here, the experts rely on the medicals and local pricing for their reports. There's typically a $2,000 flat cash fee or $4,250 on a lien. Turnaround's usually 3 to 5 weeks sooner if needed. The life care plans, however, are a little different in that they're used mostly at mediation and trial later on. They're more expensive, typically costing $8,500 payable at settlement only. If you lose the case, you wouldn't owe us anything. The catastrophic plans are $17,000, and the vocational and economic reports, which we also do on a lien, are $4,750, and the turnarounds on average between 4 to 6 weeks, a little longer. Here are two, bear with me. Here are two highlights of plans, catastrophic and non-catastrophic. You can see the big difference between the two is really the home care and health services that the patient needs. In other words, they're no longer independent. That's the main difference here. You can see it's $1.4 million with the catastrophic cases, and just a fraction of that, $9,600 in the non-catastrophic case. Obviously, that's a person that's getting back on their feet much quicker. Here's a sample of a medical cost projection. You could see the chiropractic care, physical therapy, orthopedic evaluation, the ACL repair, post-op PT are all added in here, arriving at an amount of $194,000. And this is just part of the MCP report. Now, let's focus on the more common mid-range cases that are non-catastrophic, that are valued at, $100,000, $50,000, $100,000 and up. Most attorneys have anywhere from 5 to 20 cases in this category, many more than the much rarer catastrophic cases that life care plans are utilized on. Now, the non-catastrophic cases that warrant one of these future medical reports have a minimum value $50,000 to $100,000. The plaintiff must have some continuing medical issues and require treatment. Also, the adjuster's offer, if any, is unacceptable. They often may say the client's a malingerer, show me your actual damages, and now instead of speculating, you're able to give them hard numbers, which makes a big difference. The medical cost projections will often come into play on motor vehicle cases, slip and fall, with the typical neck and pain treatments, pain injections, and possible future surgeries. Now, this is a typical motor vehicle commercial policy case where the policy is $250,000. This is just for example's sake. The life care plan or possibly the medical cost projection is commissioned, and it comes in at a value of $400,000, exceeding the policy. Now, when this happens, it puts the adjuster in a quandary. They've offered $25,000, let's say, but now they see the report exceeding the policy, and they have to be concerned about possible bad faith claims. So now it gets interesting because suddenly you'll see the reserves start shooting up and the offers wind up escalating and may very well be the policy limits in this case. We're finding on average in medical cost projections, the plaintiffs are recovering $50,000 to $100,000 more per case. Now, here are a couple of comments from clients, testimonials. In the first, and this is for life care plans. The first client had a motor vehicle case. There was an offer of $7,000. There was a leg fracture, a herniated disc, and fractured tooth. They wound up getting on that case $200,000. On the second case that was catastrophic, that settled for nearly $2 million, the client was quite happy in that they didn't have to lay out the typical $15,000 and up to get that life care plan. They held on to the money, and that worked to their benefit. No cash outlay. Here on a couple of medical cost projections, the first case, the client was happy that with only a single epidural injection on a motor vehicle case, he was able to get $100,000. Normally, he said it took 3 or 4 injections to obtain that. On the case at the bottom, the third testimonial, after the liability claim or policy was settled, they made a demand on the uninsured motor vehicle carrier and was only offered $2,500, but by providing a medical cost projection showing the future hard costs, they were able to obtain $35,000 on that case. Now, the chart below, which we'll be sending to you with this presentation at the end, contains a lot of information. It has a sampling of about 8 cases that either MCPs or life care plans were used on, and you see the impact on the case from the initial offer, the defense offer, the policy limits, and what the case was eventually settled for, and how much more. You can see, for instance, on the first case, it was a motor vehicle case. There was a $250 policy. There was a $35,000 offer. The case went to mediation, and with the plan that showed it was actually worth $463,899, the case settled 7 months post-demand for 7 times the original offer, or for over $200,000. And if you look at the other cases, you'll see on average with the plans, the cases settled about 6 months post-demand, and on average about 10 times over the initial lowball offer by the adjusters. You'll see there were 3 catastrophic cases included at the bottom of this grid, where the clients would have likely gotten a life care plan regardless. The cases were too big not to. But on those cases, the attorney would have had to have paid out of pocket. So here they were able to save $10,000, $20,000 on a few cases. It really can add up. Now, the lien underwriting and funding process. It's quite simple. The attorneys apply to our funder underwriting partner. You let us know your theories of liability, the damages with some documentation, and then the case viability is verified usually in 1 to 3 days by our underwriters. At that point, all of the records are requested for the life care planner. Interviews can be set up down the road, and the life care plan or medical cost projection is prepared by the actual testifying life care planner. our funder promptly pays them. They in no way work on contingency, which would be problematic. Should testimony be necessary, the attorney would be paying the expert directly their customary testifying fee. They would typically visit the plaintiff pre-testimony as well, and that testimony fee is usually in the $4,000 to $5,000 range. Upon settlement, the funder is paid usually $8,500 on non-catastrophic cases, or double that on catastrophic, in effect making the funding risk-free. If you lose the case, you don't owe us anything. It's our treat. Now, vocational and economist reports are also available on a lien. The vocational look at the length of the rehab necessary, what the vocational handicaps are going forward, to see how much the client may be losing over their lifetime in their earnings due to the injuries. The economist typically will look and put together the present value calculations for lost earnings, for lost earning capacity in the future, household services, etc. Typically, the fee for this is $4,750. The applications are pretty simple. We have online forms on our website. This is part of the form for a life care plan. This for the medical cost projection. Now, I'd like to conclude, and then we'll be taking some questions. Now, with the medical cost projections and the life care plans, attorneys no longer need to leave money on the table. Now, for the first time, for deserving $50,000 cases and up, where they're continuing medical treatments, you're able to get a fair settlement. You can utilize these services cash and risk-free on your deserving catastrophic and non-catastrophic cases, obviously maximizing your settlements and firm profit. I'd like to ask Linda a few questions in a minute or two before taking your questions. Again, you can type in your questions on the box on the right for questions. Afterwards, we'll be sending both a 2-minute animated overview of the service as well as the webinar to you that you can review and share with any colleagues who are unable to make the call. Now, first I'd like to mention that about 98% or so of life care planners are not MDs. They're PhDs in other specialties. Now, though, a lot of doctors, particularly physical medicine and pain and rehab docs, are getting into this business because it can be very lucrative. I've often been asked, what are the pros and cons of using doctors versus non-MDs? And there are really pros and cons to both. You know, MDs have impressive CVs, but sometimes they tend to overstep their bounds when testifying and talk as if they were the treating doctors in talking about the future versus just life care planners. And sometimes when they testify about a surgery that they'll never do anyway, the courts have struck their testimony. They've been doubted out. Non-MDs, the advantage with them is they're not stepping in the shoes of the treaters. They're just interpreting numbers. They're kind of number crunchers, and they compose all of the future costs. That's all they do. So they're not as susceptible on cross-examination as a doctor who may overstep their bounds. Sometimes if the treaters are uncooperative, the medical life care planner, the MD life care planner, can maybe help a bit with the foundation. So there are pros and cons to both. Now, Linda, I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Linda, with when there's a problem getting a medical foundation of the treating doctors, often they're not as cooperative as you'd like. What would you recommend the attorneys do?
Well, the first step is the treating doctors, and if they don't cooperate, then we would rely on an IME or some kind of physician or specialist to examine their client. And in the absence of that, that would not be for a life care plan, but for a cost projection, we would use some clinical practice guidelines or standards of practice that are available.
Okay, now, Linda, you've done both medical cost projections and life care plans. How as a life care planner do you approach them differently? Tell us the differences from your viewpoint.
Okay, so the difference between a life care plan and a cost projection is the process. So you talked earlier about life care planners not required to be certified, which that could really get them in trouble when it comes to deposition and testimony because they have not completed the process correctly. They're not abiding by the standards of life care planning, which are available online, so any attorney can find them. And they tend to overstep outside their area of expertise. So when you're preparing a life care plan and you're certified and you follow the correct process, you do interview the client either in person or through Skype or FaceTime or some way that you can actually see them. You reach out to the treating physicians for foundation and support of what their future care recommendations will be. And then again, if we don't get that, then we rely upon what the present treatment is or what an expert might give in a narrative, or we go to the clinical practice guidelines. We put that all together, and then we put that's the life care plan. For the cost projection, that's typically done right off the records. There's no client interview. The better narrative you have from the treating doctors, the better cost projection we can get, because then we have, we can cost out whatever they recommend. There's another process that we can use for cases that are not quite a life care plan, but maybe a little bit more than a cost projection, and that would be an expanded cost projection. And that's something that really is kind of on a case-by-case basis. So if you're ever in doubt, there's no, just call and we'll discuss and figure out which is the best product for you to use. But the cost projections are done right off the records, and an expanded cost projections might include an interview with reaching out to the doctors or an interview with the client.
And how have you found the results on reports that you've done, particularly MCPs? Have you gotten much feedback from your regular clients?
I'm getting a lot of repeat business, so they must be getting very good results. I don't have hard numbers, but I know that we do cases for the same attorneys over and over again, and this is over a year. So I'm assuming that they have some really good results because they wouldn't come back if they didn't.
Yeah, I think I've gotten feedback from attorneys that have told me they believe an extra $50,000 to $100,000 over the offer. That's not unusual, and if you've got a practice where you've got 5, 10, 20, or 50 cases that fall within this range, it can be quite additive. Now, I'm going to, at this point, take some questions, and I see we have some. First question, are these available on demand letters? Well, what we're suggesting attorneys do is they include the report, the medical cost projection, right out of the gate on your demand letters to get the adjuster's attention. At that point, they're starting to look at you and the case differently than they would otherwise. They think you're committed to the case, you believe in it, you probably spent some money getting this report, and typically the reserves will shoot up. And there's no reason to wait to get a medical cost projection. Get it at the start so that you could gain some momentum on the case and push up the reserves. No reason to wait till later on, particularly if you're not even spending any money and you're doing it on a lien. A few people have asked, do you have any sample reports you can send? We have them on our website, but we'll include them in a follow-up email to all of you attendees, so you'll see a sense of what they're like.
Can I
another
interject
question?
a little bit here, Elliot? One real fast. If you send it in too early and there isn't enough treatment and there's no idea of how the injury is going to progress or how the response is to the treatment, it could be a little too early. So you need to have at least some substance to the treatment so that we can actually give you a good report.
Right. And good point, and you don't have to wait till the treatments are all done. If you've got the treaters with the medical foundation giving you the outlook of the future and what the patient is to expect and how they're to be treated, that's good enough. You don't have to wait until the treatments are actually rendered. No reason to do that. I've got another few questions here. In California, we have to show reasonableness of the medical cost, not simply what was billed. Typically, this is what is paid, recovered in the community. Do you folks determine reasonableness of past medical expenses? And Linda, I'm going to let you handle that.
Well, that's something that would be a specific request, because unless we're given all the bills, there's no way we could determine the reasonableness. But if whatever I have, I would point it out to you, but there would be no specific report or statement unless we have all the bills to verify that.
Now, in the event that we don't have all the bills, we look into different types of sources that have the medical billing costs, per each jurisdiction, down to, I believe, even the zip code. What's charged in Los Angeles, for instance, for this procedure or that procedure. There are books and pamphlets where all that is available, and often to help fill in blanks, our life care planners will go to that to get some of the numbers where they need some assistance. Another question, is this program seminar available on demand later? And we'll be, as I said before, we'll be sending you the copy of this seminar along with some sample products. Are there any other questions? Well, if not, we'll end the program today. I appreciate everyone's taking the time out to attend. Thanks again.